Millions of Floridians have been vaccinated for the coronavirus. You're probably one of them. And you probably have questions about how being vaccinated could change things at the workspace. Well, now, especially if you might be going back to the office for the first time. We're going to go in depth with an attorney about what you could expect. When the coronavirus started spreading across the country and the world last year, most businesses put safety protocols into place for the workplace, like mask wearing, social distancing, and even remote learning. But as more and more people are getting vaccinated, there are new questions about what employers can do in the workplace. What are employees' rights now as far as maybe getting vaccinated and having to wear a mask? Well, joining us now to discuss the issue is Tampa attorney Robert Shimberg from the law firm of Hill Ward Henderson. And welcome, Robert. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, before I start asking you some questions, I want to put out this idea here. I think that most companies had three big reasons for instituting some of the workplace safety protocols. The first one is a moral imperative. You want to do the right thing. You want to make sure that your employees and customers don't get sick. The other one is fiduciary. If you don't do the right thing and somebody gets sick, you could get sued and you could lose a whole bunch of money. And the final one is legal. Maybe you could be held legally responsible for when something bad happens. But as more people are getting vaccinated now, there are a lot of questions about what companies can and cannot do. So maybe the first one is, if somebody's fully vaccinated, can their employer still make them, say, wear a mask?
So their employer, yes, could still say wear a mask if the employer is following the CDC guidelines, which currently still recommend mask wearing for indoors. That would be a basis for the employer to say it. But at the same time, the employer could say, based on the vaccinated status of an individual, that they don't need to wear a mask at work.
A couple of questions about getting vaccinated. A lot of people are working remotely. What if a company says, if you want to come back to the workplace, maybe an office, you've got to be vaccinated first? Can they do that?
Generally, yes, they can do that with two noted exceptions. If the individual can't be vaccinated for a medical disability reason, or if the individual has a sincerely held religious belief.
So let's say, and again, let's say you're currently working in a workplace, and the company might say, in order to work here, you've got to be vaccinated. What about this anti-passport law that the legislature and governor are enacting that says you can't require a vaccination?
So based on what's currently happening with the advent of the governor's order, which may now become a law in the state of Florida, that generally affects someone coming into a business as a patron, that you can't require someone coming into your business as a patron to provide you with some type of vaccine passport. Generally speaking, as far as employment considerations, an employer would still have the right to ask an employee to be vaccinated to come back to work. But again, what I would recommend strongly is that employers take a very close look at the executive order that now may become law in Florida and really review the ins and outs of it, as it may affect educational institutions, as an example, differently than others. So you need to really review the specifics of that law.
Now, I've heard that there's a story out there that a company said to their employees, if you get vaccinated, we don't want you to work here. Is that really true?
So there is a report of that happening. I believe it's somewhere out of South Florida in the Miami area. And in that case, the employer has apparently made a policy, something to that effect. And, the issues that would be involved there would be, what if an employee had previously gotten their vaccine before the employer came down with this mandate? What if the employee went to the employer and said, hey, listen, from a safety standpoint, I feel much more comfortable being vaccinated and would ask you to consider that. So there's issues that need to be considered with that type of edict as well.
I don't know if this is exactly a legal question or not. Maybe it's kind of a moral question or a freedom question. But let's say we get, I don't know, 3 months down the road, and everybody who wants a vaccine has had plenty of opportunity to get a vaccine. If you're in a workplace where the company says, even though you're fully vaccinated and everybody's had their shot at getting a vaccine, should companies still say you still must wear a mask in the workplace? What, I guess, legal or moral responsibility can they have to impose a mask on somebody when everybody's had their chance to be vaccinated?
So again, a lot of what that will come down to is things like what are the guidelines or the recommendations from the standpoint of different agencies or different governmental entities that may have a stake in this, whether it's the CDC, whether it's the State Department of Health, the different people that have been researching and looking into these things. And then the other issue will come down to, you talk about, 3 months from now, how many people would have been vaccinated? And, the doctors talk about this concept of herd immunity. And if at that point, certainly the workplace is at herd immunity, and you look at Major League Baseball as an example. I just read where they said if teams get to 85%, vaccinated, then the restrictions, if you will, that they had were going to be significantly loosened. So, at that point that you're talking about, as time goes on, businesses need to look at all those factors and weigh all those factors as they make a decision to what works in their workplace for them and their employees.
Robert, one last question for you. Have you heard of any employees challenging the rules that companies may have for mask wearing or, say, getting vaccinated?
So haven't heard about it from the standpoint of a court case. But again, these things are happening in real time, and we'll keep our, eyes and ears open to see if something like that materializes in the near future.
All right. Robert Shimberg, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.